if you were to ask someone from the West who has no idea about anything of Hinduism or Vedic teachings, the only thing that they could probably come up with is this idea of yoga. And a lot of people think that it's just fun stretches, relaxing stretches to make you more calm and at peace with yourself. That is like a very, very minute thing. It's grossly misappropriated, but I don't really have a problem with people going to a yoga class. That's not the point. This is, I believe, my fifth iteration now in Bhagavad Gita lessons. Today, I thought I would share this idea of what is yoga, what actually is yoga, how can one practice yoga in a constant loop, a constant cycle, and breaking down the categories of yoga. So, with that being said, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna breaks down that there are four types of yoga. I'm going to be referencing this book, A Comprehensive Guide to Bhagavad Gita with Literal Translation by H.D. Goswami. He is a Harvard educated man, PhD in Sanskrit and Indian studies. He's a great, fantastic guy. I love watching his videos and things of that nature. But anywho, he basically breaks down, Krishna breaks down yoga into four categories. We have karma yoga, jnana yoga, dhyana yoga, and bhakti yoga. So I'm going to go ahead and explain all four. But I think what's crucial to understand is this idea of the soul. In Hinduism, we believe that the soul is eternal. It never dies. Of course, this is the idea of reincarnation. The logic goes, if God is infinite and we are God's creation, the piece of us that makes us who we are, our consciousness, our soul, is also infinite. Now, do we differ soul-wise compared to the Supreme, the Divine, whether that be Krishna or, Brahman? Yes, of course. It's this idea that God is one and the same with us, but is also different. The best imagery I'd like to use is this idea of sun versus the sunshine. You can make the argument that the sunshine is a part of the sun, but the sun itself is one it's in its own, right? The sun is the source. The sun is, the all-pervading thing that delivers the sunshine. But we can look at sunshine as its own individual thing apart from the sun, even though it's one and the same. So these ideas of contradiction, you're unfortunately going to have to get used to them because they show up like crazy in Hinduism. And contradictions are something we actually embrace. That because Krishna is so all-powerful and all-knowing, he can make these well thought out and virtuous contradictions. But the reason why I say it's important to understand this idea of the soul is to understand your place within the universe. Your place in the universe, your ultimate goal, so to speak, is to get back to the source of creation. People call it nirvana if you're a Buddhist, call it enlightenment if you want to give an English word. But in Sanskrit, we'd like to call it moksha. And this is basically this idea of detaching yourself from the material nature, understanding that the fundamental truth is that everything is inherently empty, and the real pleasures in life are not external. Rather, it's detaching yourself from your attachment to your desires. And I've made plenty of videos about what that is, and you can go back and watch how do you apply those things to your everyday life. But for someone who's like, okay, Aryan, I understand that this is how it works. We have to detach yourself. I'm on that boat. I don't want to be attached to my desires. What now? And this is where this is where yoga comes in. Yoga is that tool, so to speak. And within this toolbox, you have different the four types of yoga. We have karma yoga, jnana yoga, dhyana yoga, and bhakti yoga. So I guess I'll start with karma yoga because it's probably the most famous. Karma yoga is, in English, action yoga. Some people will like to say that there's good and there's bad karma. It's like a balance sheet. You can have all this good karma and you can have all this bad karma, and as long as your good karma outweighs your bad karma, you're in the red or you're in the green, you're in the clear, you're ready to go. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. It's karma in itself is a direct translation to action. And what does that necessarily mean? It means that your action is in your control. You have the free will to basically choose your actions and own up and take responsibility. It's just this idea that, don't live on autopilot. Don't let things just happen to you. Put your hand on the steering wheel and understand where you are in this universe. And I think the best example of that really helps people understand is this idea between, what is really my responsibility. And I think a good example that I like to bring up is, let's say, you have a house and a hurricane comes crashing in and beats your house to shit. You can do one of two things. You could either sit there and cry and moan and say, no, my house is burnt, or my house has been swept away by this hurricane, and it's not my fault. There's nothing that I did. Or you could say, damn, I should have built a better house, and you know what, I'm going to do better. One of those options is going to lead you to a better house at the end of the day, and the other option is just going to leave you with nothing instead of rather just, sad and sorrow. Even though it wasn't your fault technically that your house, came crashing down, you're still going to end up with a better house with the latter option. So karma is just this idea that your actions do have consequences, and understanding that um, positions you better into this world. You don't want to live life thinking, we're just on some floating rock and nothing even matters, because people do see that their actions have consequences. For example, when you work very hard in a test or to study for a test and you do well, that's your action at work. So that's karma. Next, I'd like to talk about jnana yoga. Gnana, jnana. It's jnana. It's hard to pronounce, but this is basically knowledge yoga. And this is the idea that um, there are a lot of people out there that we can ascribe to be sort of like spiritual masters, like gurus, guiding lights in our world. For some people, that might be Jesus Christ. So for some people, that might be Muhammad. For a lot of people, that's Krishna or the Buddha, for example. In a universal sort of Hindu idea, these spiritual masters, these gurus, whatever you want to call them, can be those guiding lights for us, and pick out and show us the knowledge that we need to achieve yoga. So for me personally, I like to read up on everything. I like to have the Bhagavad Gita. I like to have the Quran. I'd like to have the Bible. All these sort of things. Of course, this is very controversial for a lot of people, but the way I was raised and the way I read my scripture, this is the natural conclusion that I lead to, is this idea of gaining knowledge, understanding wisdom, why the world works the way it does. That's only going to position you in a better place. For example, going back to a math test, if you were to, just, there's a difference. Like, for example, you get a study guide for your math test, right? What are you better off doing? Are you better off just memorizing all the answers for your study guide and hopefully that'll get you to the answer when it comes to the test? The answer is no. What you do want to do is look at all the answers of the study guide and understand how and why you got those answers, so you can build that knowledge, build that understanding, and then apply that to the test. And when it comes test time, you pass the test with flying colors. That's what knowledge yoga is, and it's pretty simple, pretty easy to understand. The next one is dhyana yoga, or meditation yoga. Also a fun one, also my favorite. It's this idea that you know it's very hard for us as humans to be in a constant state of like this total spiritual being. So this idea of meditation, what is meditation truly? Obviously you can think of this idea of sitting crisscross applesauce, closing your eyes, maybe going or chanting something, or thinking about your breath, all those types of things. All that kind of stuff, I just kind of want you to throw out the window. For me, meditation means, and for a lot of people it is, just recognizing your thoughts. If you ever watched Avatar: The Last Airbender, towards the end of the season, spoiler alerts, the Aang is learning about, releasing his chakras, and he does it through the meditation of just sitting down. You have no phone. You're not listening to music or anything like that. But, you sit down and you really take in the moment. You are totally present within the moment. And this goes back to this thing that I mentioned earlier. God is infinite. Our souls are infinite because we are God's creation. Therefore, meditation is infinite. So don't just think that I have to sit crisscross applesauce and think about, nothing or think blank thoughts. No, I've seen plenty of people who use, for example, martial arts. Boxing a punching bag, for example. You are totally invested in this moment. It's not about, how hard can I punch this punching bag. It's purely present within the moment. This action is what I'm doing. And, you know, that's that idea of once you understand, once you are fully present within the moment, within a meditative stance, you are going to find yourself understanding the true fundamental nature of reality, which is that everything is empty and we have to go back, preferably to the enlightenment and detach ourselves from these material desires. I hope this is not overwhelming. I'm trying to keep it as concise and easy to understand, at least from a Western perspective, as possible. And last but not least, we have Bhakti Yoga or devotion yoga. And this goes back to the idea that, there's a very famous Hindu mystic that I love and adore. He was about around the 1800s. His name was Sri Ramakrishna. And he attested to achieving enlightenment in every major religion. I'm talking Islam, Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, everything. He would attend a church, a mosque, and attest to reach the sole purpose, the sole fundamental goal of each and every religion. And after coming to those conclusions, he came to the deep and, in my opinion, true realization that God has many names. And you can call him Allah, you can call him Yahweh, you can call him Krishna, but at the end of the day, God is one, and God can be approached through many ways, in many forms. A pure, intentional, devotional person towards God is on the right path nonetheless. Sure, are there more preferred ways in Hinduism? Yeah, like reading the Bhagavad Gita, that's going to maybe, lead you to a more truthful, and maybe easier guiding light, for sure. But this idea that, a Christian who goes to church and, is praying every day and very pure and intentional with their love for God, are we automatically going to dismiss that as a false god or a demon or like Satan or pagan or whatever? The answer is no. And, a lot of people say, well, what about animal sacrifices in some religions, or like Scientology, for example? What are they pure with theirs? And the answer I give is like this, enlightenment. Picture us in the material world on this side of the river and enlightenment on that side of the river. You can take many different boats. There are all kinds of boats out there you can use. In my opinion, the boat of true, pure devotion to Krishna of the Bhagavad Gita, who laid out these principles and have been proven time and time again, I think that's going to be the most efficient boat for a lot of people. But is there shame? Is there anything wrong with someone who's on a Christian boat, an Islam boat, right? Some boats, I'll tell you what, will probably not get you there. For example, following, very fringe kind of extremist religions. Yeah, those boats are probably not going to work. But at the end of the day, all the boats, all major religions, so to speak, that have gained a lot of success and peaceful, sort of, maybe mostly peaceful, outcomes, you could logically conclude that, hey, if you are embracing God, if you are truly accepting of one of his many names, you're on that right path. Therefore, if you ever notice that Hindu is never going to be like, you have to convert. I'm trying to save you. This and that. We don't believe in this sort of evangelism kind of thing, which may or not be hard to understand. But just wrapping things up, yoga goes much more than exercise poses, of course. But in its totality, if you want to start, in Islam or Christianity, it's very convenient. A marking point is, you get baptized, or you say this creed that there is no God but Allah, or something along those lines. That is how you initiate yourself. But for a lot of people who are like, what is this Hinduism type of thing? I'm trying to understand it. Maybe I want to apply these practices to my life. Unfortunately, in my opinion, fortunately, there is no initiation. There is no thing you have to confess. It's just this idea of, using the tools that have been given to you. The answers are right in here. And you can do that by understanding what yoga is, how to apply yoga, and yoga is really that toolbox that will get you to the enlightenment. Um, like I said, I'm not asking you to accept this as 100% truth, but maybe recognizing that some of these values, some of these principles that are laid out, you know, being intentional with your actions and karma, gaining knowledge and wisdom, and understanding the why through jnana yoga, or meditating, be fully present within the moment, dhyana yoga, or being devotional with whatever name you have for God or the divinity or your spirituality or whatever is bhakti. All those things are very applicable in a lot of faiths and a lot of philosophies and just people in general. And that's kind of what Hinduism boils down to, is this is how the world works, this is how the universe works, is the fundamental truth about reality. It is here if you want it. If not, that's up to you. That's totally okay. We're not going to punish you for not believing it. And there is no like ultimate reward for people who believe and spread it, because this is just the laws. These are just how things work. But this has been one of my longest videos. But thank you for watching. I hope I was not too overwhelming, but thank you for watching.